Hey everybody, it's Annabelle, the VTuber demon that wants to play for fun, and I hereby invite everyone to join me on my adventures through Marvel Snap. So on today's adventures through Marvel Snap, I am taking another spin on the Spotlight Cache Roulette, trying to get the character spotlight of Bob from Hydra, also known as Hydra Bob. So Hydra Bob is a normal guy in absolutely every way. He is a 33-year-old cowardly young man who was persuaded into joining the criminal organization by his wife, who accused him of not being able to hold down a steady job. However, the thought of a stable career with a dental plan did appeal to him. While there, he kept a blog primarily remarking about the mundane, like how bad the commissary food was. Hydra Bob ran into Deadpool during an assault on a Hydra base, where he got convinced into helping out the good guys. Though he was somewhat hesitant, however, as Hydra would not allow him back into the organization if they found out he betrayed them. But Deadpool, who by the end of the assault on the base regarded him as a friend or maybe a pet, shot him on the way out of the facility so he could claim that he was being held at gunpoint and rejoined Hydra. Hydra Bob is pretty incompetent, but sometimes gets lucky, like the time he was able to fly a plane despite having no knowledge of how to do so, or when he killed a symbiote-possessed dinosaur by just simply fleeing from it. Even though he is useless in a fight, Deadpool will delight in kidnapping him for dangerous missions. It is unclear if the reason why he does not sabotage these missions is because he is afraid of Deadpool, or because he generally considers Deadpool a friend. Hydra Bob has many psychological fears ingrained into him since Hydra specifically trains their minions to flee as quickly as possible. When he is stressed, he will have a tendency to shout out, "Hail Hydra!" or other propaganda from the organization such as "Cut off one head and two more will take its place." Despite his shortcomings and his cowardice, his strength lies in him being a dedicated friend. He will challenge his own fears to help out his friend. Hydra Bob has no superpowers. He is just a regular human working for an evil organization. Sadly, he also does not have any training in combat or tactical skills. Since Hydra wants the henchmen to be cannon fodder, they only get lessons such as hide behind each other, or if you do not see an enemy, there is no way they can see you. The only reason that he is still around is due to the fact that he is better at running away when confronted with danger than any other henchman. Hydra Bob has trained himself to run away when confronted with dangers as quickly as possible, upon hearing distinctive sounds such as the think of Wolverine's claws. This is represented in Marvel Snap by the fact of him being able to actually hear when you do the snap sound effect. Every time it goes off and becoming scared and running to some other place if he can to try to hide. In Marvel Snap, he is a one-cost, full power with the description of after each turn, this moves if a player snaps. So this is Marvel Snap's first ever, what I'm going to call on-snap ability. Now, as much as a lot of people are taking a big hit to Hydra Bob and saying that he's a bad card, I actually gave him a 2-star card, which is higher than some other cards I've done in the past. And I'll explain exactly why. Now, while a lot of people are kind of seeing this as kind of a weird murder, it's actually a less powerful murder where it has a tendency to lose you the game. And while I'm not incredibly happy about the snap mechanic being linked to any card, I don't think it's a good idea to have any mechanic linked to snap. It kind of changes how the game works, because snap shouldn't be a reason that you win or lose. Your snap effect shouldn't be something you're worried about. You shouldn't worry that you shouldn't snap because it might lose you the game. Now, I know that there's a lot of games where you could snap and you still lose the game, but this is one of the only cards, or actually the only card right now, where you can legitimately lose the game by snapping. But even though that's true, there's also a way that you can kind of think of this as being a more powerful Nightcrawler. Since it's double the power of Nightcrawler, and Nightcrawler you have to physically move, and it only moves once. Now, with Bob, you get to move it twice, theoretically. You can always move it once, and your opponent can move it another time. And especially in early game, that's going to be kind of important. It has a great synergy when if you look at the Miles Morales. So what you can do on turn 1 is you can actually play down Bob, you can actually snap on the Bob, and then on turn 2 you can play down the Miles Morales and put down a 2-5 on basically that turn, where the earliest you could ever do that before was turn 3, because you had to put down Nightcrawler on 1, move it on 2, and then play the Miles on 3. There's no way to actually get a move in on 1. There's no card that moves on its own on 1. This is the first card that moves on its own on 1. Also, the 1/4 stat line is kind of a weird stat line. It's kind of almost like having a Rocket Raccoon to go off. It's less power than a Rocket Raccoon, and I wouldn't be shocked if somewhere down the lane this got moved to a 1/5. But if it did, it might be a better Marta at that point, so it's kind of weird because there is no actual 1/4 stat line in the game other than Bob at this point. Another thing that you gotta kind of look for is you kind of gotta look at Angela. Angela is any card that moves, doesn't matter what card that moves. This is now a cheap way of getting something to move out of Angela. Turn 2, you play down Angela. Turn 3, you can play Bob into her, and maybe even a Jeff the Baby Land Shark, and then snap, and Bob will go out, and then you can pull the shark out later, giving Angela +2 power on turn 4, making her on turn 4 a 2/5, which is not bad. Speaking of Jeff, this almost becomes a weird version of Jeff, almost a better version of Jeff, as it's a cheaper version of Jeff, and a more power swing than Jeff, more points on the board than Jeff. This can get into locations that no other card can get into because it's still a move card for being super cheap. This can get into your Sanctum Centaurum, this can get into your Death Domain, this can get into your move card. And you don't have to make a complete move deck out of making that happen. Now, one of the problems with Bob, I should say, is it kind of works like Silk. And Silk is a 2/5 that has that 5 to start out with. And the problem with Bob is that you don't get the agency over where it's going to move, kind of like how Silk works. When you play a card on top of Silk, it can move left, it can move right. It's just never going to move to the location where it currently is. And because you only have one chance to move it on your own, even if you have a place like Sanctum Centaurum, you might not go into Sanctum Centaurum. With that being said, there's kind of a sneaky little play where on turn 5, you could play a good 5 card like, say, Nighthawk, or any other good 5 card, and play the Bob on the 6. So on 6, you play the Nighthawk and you play the Bob. If your other location is filled up already, you can move it into like a Sanctum Centaurum, and your opponent might not realize that you have a move card because you haven't really been playing a move deck. And especially because it moves when you snap. You could win that sneaky little turn 6 where all of a sudden, turn 5 you play down Darkhawk, you play down Bob, you snap and it moves and it's the last location and bam, you won. So even though it's 4 points, if you're the only power in a lane, you're going to win that lane. Now I haven't looked into if it will double move if both people snap on the last turn, but I think it only moves once according to how it's worded. So, do be careful about that. Now, another thing that everybody's going to look out is anytime we talk about a one-cost card, we talk about Killmonger. Killmonger runs about. The earlier you play out Hydra Bob, the more likely it is to die to Killmonger. This can be a bonus, or this can be a devastating effect. It depends on whether you're trying to kill it yourself. So there's actually kind of this weird little deck that you can make up where you play a couple of good ones in the beginning, and then you destroy them all with Killmonger, and then you get a pretty decently good-sized null off of that. You play stuff like Ebony Maw, and you play stuff like Hydra Bob, and you may even play Murder in that, and then you kill it all, and then you have a pretty decently good null at the end. When you look at it as just a pure power stat line, it's hard to come up with 4 power points. There are 3-cost cards like Doc in here who only have 4 power. Yes, he gets more power if you can get rid of the blade, but I've had times where somehow that blade just does not want to get destroyed, or you can't get that blade down. Now, one of the most interesting things about it is Craven. Craven is the only thing that gets more power when something moves into it. The problem with Hydra Bob is you only get 1 chance to move into that Craven, and to take out a slot in your deck, try to make that happen might be a little bit too much. The other problem comes from effects like with how Red Hulk works, where anytime that you have to rely on your opponent doing something in order for you to get more power is hard to do. There's a lot of times where a Red Hulk won't get past that 13 power, because as soon as he gets that first power point in him, your opponent's going to basically sit there and try everything to make sure that your card doesn't win. And sometimes that can lose you an 8-cube game, because of either A, your opponent snaps at that last second and it moves into a location you didn't expect it to and you lose the power point. Or just because they know it's going to win if they do snap, and they're just not going to snap because they know if they do, they're going to lose, and then they lose 8 cubes, so the most you can pull off of him is 4 cubes. So, kind of an interesting card, kind of a weird card, but not as weak of a card as most people want to punish it with. Other cards that we have this week is Nebula. Nebula is still, to this day, the GOAT of 1-drops. You can win games just with Nebula on 1. You can win lanes with just Nebula on 1. Nebula on 1 makes everybody play differently. They will go out of their way to flood a lane with Nebula on 1. Now, the problem with Nebula is she's been in the game for so long that this is, again, part of the time at which you're kind of sitting there going, can we get this down to Series 3? This already got dropped. I think now it's in Series 4. Let me double check real quick. Actually, on this card so I can check. Hang on. Nebula, what do you go into? That's not what I meant to do, but I'll fix that in a second. She is a Series 4, so she is less tokens. So if you really want Nebula, you can just spend the tokens on her. The other card that we have this week is Galactus. Galactus is a big bad, will always be a big bad. And because he is a big bad, and will always be a big bad, that means he will never stop being in these Spotlight Caches. And this might not be the week to get him. Galactus isn't really a high power, high pressure deck at this point, and to go out of your way to get Galactus right now might not be worth it in this particular bundle. Now, if you're missing all 3, then go for it, but I would say even if you just own Galactus, skip this week. Even if you just own Nebula, skip this. And especially if you just own Galactus, skip this week, because you can buy Nebula, and no offense to Second Dinner, Hydra Bob, as much as I like him, there's no way that he should have been a Series 5 card. For him to be a 6,000 collector's token card is ridiculous. For him to be a 4-key card is ridiculous. This is one of the few cards that I would not be shocked and amazed, surprised if somewhere before the end of this month, if not even before the end of this week, he gets some sort of buff to him. He just is a weird stat line for what he is, and right now the only thing you can adjust on him is the stat line. So if you got stuff last week, or if you don't have many keys this week, this is a perfect week to skip. I always spend at least 1 key because that's what I do for my content, so let's find out what's in the box. Box says, ooh, Ghost Spider. Alright, so this Friday I will be playing Ghost Spider. If you've never seen me do it before, it'll be my first time trying out Ghost Spider. I hope you all join me. As always, I want to thank you all so much for watching, and always, remember, play for fun.